With the Chicago Bulls being open to trade Lonzo Ball, it seems to be a few teams are interested, but a new team has entered the fray, and also we now know the offer that has actually been discussed, the parameters of a deal with Lonzo Ball going to the Minnesota Timberwolves. We'll talk about all that and more right after this. What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host, Hayes, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go and get to this content for today, y'all. And we got a new hot, I would call it, it's a little bit more than a rumor, but again, it doesn't come from like a source inside the Chicago Bulls, and that is that the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Chicago Bulls have discussed the parameters of a deal that could potentially send Lonzo Ball to the Minnesota Timberwolves in exchange for a signing trade for Nickeill Alexander-Walker. Now, this is a player that we have talked about before that we did hear that the Bulls did have some interest in on the free agent market is Nickeill Alexander-Walker. I look at this and I say Nickeil brings a lot of things that the Bulls could need that could make a lot of sense for them on that wing position. Nickeill Alexander-Walker, a player that over his career basically split his time 50-50 between the shooting guard and small forward role. Really good wing defender when it comes down to it. When you look at some of his advanced analytics defensively, they really do stand out in a lot of ways where he holds the player that he's guarding down to almost a 3% worse field goal shooting percentage than what he shoots what they shoot any other time. That's really good, especially for a perimeter player being able to have that type of impact. The thing that Nickeill Alexander-Walker would also bring to this team is a versatile wing that could play next to Coby White. He can play next to Buzelis. He can even fill in and play with Ayo Dosunmu as a backup unit as well. Nickeill Alexander-Walker would be a really good player here for the Chicago Bulls, and especially when you look at the fact that for Lonzo Ball specifically, it makes a lot of sense. Now, we know that Lonzo is a player that AK has really been in love with. That's why he got an extension, things like that. But we have heard that the Bulls are open to moving off of Lonzo Ball in the right deal as teams are interested because Lonzo's contract is low. And that's the enticing part here for the Minnesota Timberwolves. The Timberwolves are a team that are trying to desperately avoid that second tax apron. And while they have free agents in Nickeill Alexander-Walker, potentially Julius Randle, potentially Naz Reid, if those guys both opt out, they're not going to be able to keep everyone. Being able to bring, though, a player back in Lonzo Ball who's on a cost-effective contract with only a $10 million contract, that shapes out pretty well. When you look at that in comparative, Nickeill Alexander-Walker was a cap hit of $8 million, or he has a cap hold of $8 million. Last year got paid $4.3 million. So theoretically, even if the Chicago Bulls were to sign Nickeill Alexander-Walker to a $10 million contract so that the sign and trade works out perfectly 1-for-1, that does not increase their salary cap at all. Now, the question is that what Nickeill Alexander-Walker is going to want out on the open market? That's a question that they have to ask for another day. You look at him, he has a career earnings of $22 million for his career. So him even getting a $10 million contract would be him almost doubling his career earnings. Well, not doubling, him getting almost half of what he earned his entire career just in one season. So that could be a pretty reasonable contract for Nickeill Alexander-Walker. And the thing that he brings here that, like I said, that I like so much about Nickeill Alexander-Walker is the defensive ability with, though, the ability to stretch the floor. When you look at Nickeill Alexander-Walker for his career, he's a 36% three-point shooter, but over the last 3 years, he shot the ball almost 39% over the last 3 years, taking last year, for example, 4.5 three-pointers per game and hitting that at a 31% clip. The season before that with the Timberwolves, he took 4 three-pointers per game and hit that at a 39% clip. So this is a guy that really does shoot the ball really effectively over his career. He basically has gotten better as a three-point shooter every year. But what I love about him is how he can be a seamless fit in for the Chicago Bulls. He doesn't need a whole bunch of shots. You don't have to run a bunch of offense for him. He actually is a very complimentary player, whether you're looking at starting him with that defense, right? I do think Kevin Huerter, unless he's moved, is going to have an opportunity to stay in the role that he played well in for the Chicago Bulls last year. But if you do move Huerter, or if you even bring Nickeill Alexander-Walker off the bench, now having two versatile defensive wings in Nickeill Alexander-Walker and Ayo Dosunmu, both who are decent three-point shooters as well, I kind of like that coming off the bench. And like I said, it takes nothing away from Modest Buzelis, as you're hoping that he's going to take a next step up as well as a shooter next year. That makes some sense there for them as well. This is a move that I'm not going to say is the perfect move. Of course, we all know the Bulls didn't get what became the 18th overall pick for Lonzo when they could have. Nothing's going to change that. Nothing's going to take away from that. But when they signed Lonzo Ball to that contract, many people, pundits, did point out how it is an easily tradable contract if that's what you need to do. And that's what it seems like the Bulls are prepared if the deal makes sense. This is one that makes sense. Nickeil is not necessarily the on-ball defender, and he's not the passer that Lonzo Ball is. But when you having Josh Giddey, with you having Coby White, and even Ayo Dosunmu, who in transition is a really good passer, with you having those guys, Nickeill Alexander-Walker can slide in there. He's kind of a more consistent defender than Patrick Williams. Not necessarily the shooter that P. Will has been at P. Will's best, but it brings in competition for that. I think at that point, you're looking at Dalen, Julian Phillips, and Patrick Williams all fighting out for minutes on that wing, whereas Nickeil is more of a 2-3. Dalen is a 2-3 as well. You also have Julian and Patrick Williams, who are 3-4s that can play either the 3 or the 4 position. So you have the opportunity to really bring in some competitiveness into training camp as well in a year that people have to prove it. So I think that this deal makes sense. I think Nickeill Alexander-Walker is a acquisition that potentially makes sense for the Bulls without really getting in the way in too much of what they have here and the players that they want to see more from as well. I think it puts the Bulls in a really good position. I'm not saying this is the perfect deal. I'm not saying that the Bulls should even take this deal necessarily if there are better ones out on the market, but you're starting to see that there are teams that are interested in Lonzo. And for the Minnesota Timberwolves to get a point guard in the building there that can shoot and can defend, doesn't need a lot of shots himself, can pass also, that can relieve some of those duties from Anthony Edwards. Yes, there's huge questions about Lonzo and his health. Make no mistake about that. I'm not trying to act like those questions aren't there. That's something that Lonzo's going to have to prove to himself. But it seems like teams are willing to take the calculated risk on a Lonzo Ball trade because of the upside that he brings when he's on the court. Keep in mind, Lonzo's still one of our best on-off ball players as far as when he's on the court, how he changes the game and makes a positive impact both defensively and offensively when he's on the court. And the Bulls would be right to leverage that into trade talk to try to see if they can get a guy that makes more sense for their team. So I'm not mad at this. It really does seem like, by the way, and I just want to say this. Now, it seems like we can't say anything for sure until we actually see it, but it does seem like AK is doing more behind the scenes than maybe what even he led on to in his postseason press conference where he preached patience and waiting till the summer of 2026. I don't know if he's realized that the market has changed. I don't know if he realized that there's some players out there that can help them now. But per these rumors, if these are to be, even if half of these are to be believed, right? Because some of this is cap, right? I think in all of this, like you hear so many rumors from so many different places, some of it's bound to be some cap there. But when you look at for what it's worth, I think that even if half of these are true, AK's been making calls. AK has been on the phone, whether that be for people calling him or him making calls out. And now we just got to see. But by the way, Lonzo Ball last year, only 777 minutes played, but he had a plus minus of plus 9.3. And he had, an opponent scored 6.7 points less per 100 possessions when Lonzo was on the court last year. That's the impact that Lonzo has. And that could be why teams, especially teams that are trying to make a move to a championship level, could be willing to bite on Lonzo because he's low cost, low risk, because keep in mind, it has a team option after next season. So if it doesn't work out, the team can get out of that contract if need be. There's a lot of reasons why this makes sense for teams that we've heard are interested in Lonzo. The Dallas Mavericks, now the Minnesota Timberwolves, the Clippers, right? These teams being potentially interested in Lonzo because of the low risk, potential high reward if you can get Lonzo healthy at the right time. And yeah, of course, teams are going to have to manage those expectations. I don't know if he'll ever not be on a minutes restriction. We shall see, but he got that minutes restriction up to, I think, 28 minutes before he went out again. So, hopefully there's that aspect of it. We'll see what happens. Overall, I think Lonzo, who we just heard recently as well, is back in the lab working. He's preparing for the season. He's working out, things like that, which is really good. This is the first time Lonzo has not been in place of having to do just recovery in the offseason. So even if he is in a Bulls uniform next year, hopefully he's ready and prepared, because with the way that he impacts when he's on the court, that's a player that I would love to have, whether it's on this team if he can stay healthy, or I'm sure other teams feel the same way. So it's something to look out for. But let me know what you guys think down below. You hear that Nickeill Alexander-Walker in a potential sign and trade, sending him to the Chicago Bulls, and Lonzo to the Minnesota Timberwolves. Would that be something that you're interested in? Again, functional move, doesn't really change, like completely changes your ceiling, but I do think it's a player that you can get in that can shoot threes, that can play defense, that is a pretty healthy player over his NBA career as well. Let me know what you guys think on that down below. Make sure you're following us at Bulls Central Pod. You send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullscentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the #1 spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, but that's thanks to you, lovely and beautiful people. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See you right if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.